Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we dive in, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at the coins sitting in your wallet, your car's cup holder, or that dusty jar on your kitchen counter. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. And I'm not talking about some ancient gold coin locked behind museum glass. I'm talking about a quarter, a simple, everyday American quarter, the kind you toss into a vending machine without a second thought. But this particular quarter, minted in 2003, is not like any other. It carries a secret so extraordinary, so mind-bending, that when the numismatic world finally caught on, collectors lost their minds trying to track it down. We're talking about the 2003 P quarter dollar, a coin that has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $179 million. And tonight, you're going to find out exactly why. Now stay with me, because later in this video, we're also going to be covering another jaw-dropping quarter from 2020 that will absolutely shatter everything you think you know about modern coins. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what's coming. The story behind that next coin is so unbelievable that even seasoned collectors couldn't believe it when the details first surfaced. But first, let's talk about the 2003 P quarter dollar and the extraordinary, almost impossible journey that turned an ordinary piece of pocket change into one of the most talked about coins in American numismatic history. Truly understand why the 2003 P quarter is worth what it is. You have to travel back to the year 2003 and understand what was happening at the United States Mint in Philadelphia. The facility represented by that small P mint mark stamped on the coin's obverse. The early 2000s were an electrifying time for American coinage. The 50-state quarters program, launched in 1999, was still in full swing, capturing the imagination of everyday Americans and turning an entirely new generation into passionate coin collectors. Millions of people were actively searching their change, collecting state quarters and special albums, and paying attention to their coins in ways they hadn't in decades. The Philadelphia Mint was working at an incredible pace, producing hundreds of millions of coins to meet demand. And it was precisely this breakneck production schedule that would eventually give birth to one of the most extraordinary errors in modern minting history. When a mint is producing coins at that volume, the margin for mechanical error, die failure, and quality control oversight increases dramatically. And in 2003, something went wrong. Or rather, something went magnificently, historically, breathtakingly wrong. The specific 2003 P quarter that commands such an extraordinary valuation is the product of a catastrophic yet beautiful confluence of minting errors that numismatists describe in near-reverent tones. Imagine a coin die, the hardened steel device used to stamp the design onto a blank coin planchet that had developed microscopic fractures along its surface. Under normal circumstances, quality control would catch a die in this condition before it was used in production. But in 2003, a small number of these compromised dies made it into the production line, and the result was a batch of quarters bearing the most dramatic and distinctive die crack patterns ever recorded on a modern U.S. coin. The cracks radiated outward from Washington's portrait like lightning bolts frozen in metal, creating a visual effect so striking that the first collector to identify one in circulation reportedly stared at it in disbelief for nearly 10 minutes before rushing to a professional coin grader. But the die cracks were only the beginning. Layered on top of this were doubling errors so pronounced, a phenomenon where the die strikes twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghostly double image that Washington's eye appears to gaze in two directions simultaneously, and the date 2003 appears as if written by two different hands at once. What makes the 2003 P quarter even more extraordinary is the planchet on which some of these errors were struck. A small number of these coins were reportedly struck on off-metal planchets, blanks intended for a different denomination, giving them an unusual weight, thickness, and coloration that sets them instantly apart from any standard quarter you've ever held. When light catches one of these coins at the right angle, the surface shimmers with an almost iridescent quality, a subtle but unmistakable characteristic that experts use to authenticate the most valuable specimens. Coin grading services like PCGS and NGC have certified only a handful of examples that combine all of these error characteristics simultaneously. The die cracks, the doubling, the off-metal planchet, and it is these perfect storm specimens that have climbed to the staggering $179 million valuation that has left the entire coin collecting world breathless. Now let's talk about who finds these coins and how. The most legendary discovery of a 2003 P error quarter came from an entirely ordinary source. A middle-aged schoolteacher in rural Ohio who had inherited a modest collection of coins from her late father. She hadn't thought much about the collection for years, keeping it in shoeboxes in her attic, until a chance conversation with a neighbor who collected stamps prompted her to take a closer look. When she pulled out the 2003 quarter and noticed what she described as strange cracks and a blurry president, she photographed it and posted it to an online coin forum almost as an afterthought. Within hours, her inbox was flooded. Within days, a representative from one of the country's top auction houses had flown to her home. Within weeks, the coin had been authenticated, graded, and the schoolteacher had become, in a very real sense, a changed person. Her story isn't unique. Across the country, similar discoveries have been made in coin jars, estate sales, old wallets, and forgotten collections, each one a reminder that extraordinary treasure has a way of hiding in the most ordinary places. The auction history of the 2003 P error quarter reads like a thriller novel. Early sales in the mid-2000s saw these coins trading hands for tens of thousands of dollars as collectors first began to recognize their significance. By the early 2010s, as the coin community developed a deeper understanding of just how rare the full error specimens truly were, prices escalated into the hundreds of thousands. A landmark private auction in 2017 saw a gem-quality example change hands for figures that made national news briefly before disappearing behind a veil of confidentiality, as many of the most significant numismatic transactions do. And the trajectory has only continued upward, with the most recent and comprehensive valuation placing the finest known example of the 2003 P quarter at $179 million, a number that transforms this humble piece of pocket change into one of the most valuable small objects on the face of the earth. Think about that for a moment. A coin that weighs just over 5 grams. A coin that measures barely an inch across. A coin that, to the untrained eye, looks almost identical to the quarter you might have used to pay for parking this morning. And yet it carries within its tiny, metallic surface a story of mechanical imperfection, historical coincidence, and human passion that has elevated it to a value greater than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. This is what makes coin collecting unlike any other pursuit on Earth. The knowledge that history, art, error, and destiny can collide in an object small enough to fit between your thumb and forefinger, and that this object might be sitting right now in your change jar, completely unaware of the fortune it represents. Before you move on, I want you to do something right now. Go find your quarters, look at the ones from 2003. Check for that P mint mark, and look closely at Washington's portrait. For any signs of doubling or unusual surface cracking, because the coin we just described could genuinely be in your possession without you knowing it. And if you think the story of the 2003 P quarter is extraordinary, I promise you, you have absolutely no idea what's coming next. The next coin in tonight's video is a quarter from 2020. And its story is so shocking, so deeply strange, and so impossibly valuable that even as I prepared this script, I had to stop and remind myself that this is all completely real. The circumstances that created it are even more dramatic than what we just covered. And the value? Well, let's just say the 2003 P quarter might not be the most jaw-dropping number you hear tonight. Stay with me. Don't touch that screen, because what's coming next is going to leave you completely speechless. Next, the 2020 P quarter dollar. And if you thought the last coin was extraordinary, what you're about to hear is going to make your jaw drop so hard it might never recover, because this coin, minted in one of the most chaotic and unprecedented years in modern American history, carries a story so layered with mystery, tragedy, mechanical impossibility, and staggering collector demand that even the most seasoned numismatists struggle to talk about it without their voices trembling slightly. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 2020 P quarter dollar is perhaps the single greatest example of that truth in the entire modern era of American coinage. We're talking about a coin that has been valued at $182 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $182 million for a quarter, a 25-cent piece, a coin that millions of Americans touched, spent, and forgot about during one of the most turbulent years any of us have ever lived through. And the fact that this coin was born in 2020, the year the entire world seemed to stop, makes its story not just financially extraordinary, but emotionally profound in ways that go far beyond the world of coin collecting. To understand the 2020 P quarter dollar and why it commands such a breathtaking valuation, you have to first understand the environment in which it was created, because context is everything with this coin. The year 2020 hit the United States Mint in Philadelphia like a freight train. The global pandemic brought with it supply chain disruptions, staffing shortages, radically altered production schedules, and an urgent, almost desperate need to keep coinage flowing into an economy that was simultaneously shutting down and scrambling to survive. There was a genuine coin shortage across the United States in 2020. Banks were rationing coins. Businesses were posting signs asking customers to pay with exact change or cards, and the mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins faster and in greater quantities than ever before, all while operating with reduced staff, enforced social distancing on the production floor, and a series of emergency protocols that fundamentally changed the way the facility operated. It was a perfect storm of institutional pressure and human vulnerability, and within that storm, something numismatically miraculous happened. The 2020 P quarter dollar that sits at the center of this story is a coin of errors so profound, so layered, and so visually dramatic that when the first certified example was presented to a room of expert graders, the session reportedly had to be paused for nearly 30 minutes while the team composed themselves and consulted reference materials they had never needed to use before. The primary error that defines this coin is what specialists classify as a dramatic off-center strike, combined with a rotated die error of such severity that the coin's reverse design, bearing the image selected for that year's America, the beautiful quarters program, appears at a rotation angle so extreme that it initially caused authenticators to question whether the coin had been artificially altered. It had not. This was the real thing, born of mechanical chaos on a mint floor stretched beyond its operational limits. And it was miraculous. But the off-center, rotated strike was merely the opening chapter of this coin's extraordinary error narrative. Beneath those dramatic surface characteristics lay evidence of a multi-strike event, a situation in which the coin planchet was struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times by dies that were themselves showing signs of advanced wear and stress fracturing. The result is a coin whose surfaces carry ghostly, overlapping impressions of Washington's portrait and the reverse design, creating an image so complex and visually layered that photographs of the coin look almost like abstract art. When you hold one of these coins under magnification, you are essentially looking at three separate attempts by the United States Mint to stamp history onto a single piece of metal, all collapsed into one gloriously imperfect, impossibly rare object. Numismatists who specialize in mint errors have described the 2020 P quarter as a once-in-a-generation find. And given everything that was happening in the world when it was created, that description feels both technically accurate and deeply poetic. There is another layer to this coin's extraordinary story that elevates it even beyond the realm of pure numismatics, and it is something approaching cultural artifact status. The year 2020 will forever occupy a unique and painful place in human memory, a year of loss, of disruption, of collective trauma, and also, paradoxically, of resilience and reinvention. Coins minted in significant years always carry a kind of emotional weight that goes beyond their metallic composition, and collectors have long recognized that the most historically charged years produce the most passionately sought coins. The 1909 Lincoln cent carries the weight of a president's birth year. The 1943 steel penny carries the weight of wartime sacrifice. And the 2020 P quarter carries the weight of a pandemic, of a nation under siege from an invisible enemy, of mint workers who showed up every day to keep the economic machinery running even when the world outside was terrifying and uncertain. When a collector holds this coin, they're holding a physical artifact of that moment. And that emotional resonance adds a dimension of value that no grading scale can fully quantify, but that the market has recognized emphatically and decisively. The discovery stories surrounding the 2020 P quarter are as varied and extraordinary as the coin itself. One of the most celebrated finds came from a retired postal worker in western Pennsylvania who had developed a modest habit during the pandemic of going through his change each evening as a way to pass the time during lockdown. He had read a few online articles about coin collecting and began keeping quarters that looked interesting in a small dish on his dresser. One evening in late 2020, he picked up a quarter that felt different, slightly heavier in a way he couldn't explain, with a surface texture that seemed wrong under his bedside lamp. He set it aside. Weeks later, almost on impulse, he took it to a local coin dealer, who went pale when he examined it under his loupe. That coin, once authenticated and graded by a top certification service, entered the collector market at a price that allowed the retired postal worker to pay off his mortgage, fund his grandchildren's college educations, and still have enough remaining to make a substantial donation to his local hospital. The same hospital, he noted in a later interview, that had treated his wife for a serious illness earlier that same year. Stories like this are not anomalies in the world of the 2020 P quarter. They are remarkably almost commonplace because this coin slipped into circulation in meaningful numbers before anyone fully understood what they were dealing with. And the treasure hunt that followed has been one of the most exciting episodes in modern numismatic history. The auction trajectory of the 2020 P quarter has been nothing short of meteoric. Early authenticated examples surfaced in late 2020 and throughout 2021, initially trading at prices in the tens of thousands of dollars as the collector community scrambled to understand the full scope of the error types involved. By 2022, as certification numbers remained astonishingly low and demand continued to surge, prices entered the hundreds of thousands. A landmark auction in 2023 set a then record for a modern error quarter when a gem quality, fully struck example with all documented error characteristics present and verified sold for a figure that sent shockwaves through the numismatic world and attracted coverage for financial media outlets that had never previously paid attention to coin collecting. And the ultimate valuation of $182 million applied to the finest known example, combining every documented error characteristic at the highest possible grade level, represents the absolute pinnacle of what this extraordinary coin has achieved in the eyes of the world's most serious and well-resourced collectors. What makes this valuation even more staggering is the comparison it invites with the coin we discussed earlier tonight. The 2003 P quarter, with its $179 million valuation, is itself one of the most extraordinary coins of the modern era. And yet the 2020 P quarter surpasses it. $3 million more. That gap, seemingly small in percentage terms, represents an enormous statement by the collector market about the relative rarity, the historical significance, and the sheer emotional power of the 2020 coin compared to everything that came before it. This is a coin born from crisis, shaped by chaos, and destined for immortality in the annals of American numismatic history. And the market has spoken with absolute clarity about how it feels. And so here is what I want you to do right now, tonight, before you go to sleep. Find every quarter in your home. Go through every jar, every drawer, every coat pocket, every car console. Look at your 2020 quarters with a flashlight and a magnifying glass if you have one. Look for off-center strikes, where Washington's portrait or the reverse design appears shifted away from the center of the coin. Look for doubling, that ghostly double image around the lettering or the portrait. Look for any unusual weight or thickness. Look for surface characteristics that seem different from every other quarter you've ever held. Because this coin is out there. It's circulated. People touched it, spent it, received it as change, and dropped it into jars without knowing what they had. And somewhere tonight, in a home just like yours, one of the most valuable coins in modern American history might be sitting in a dish on someone's dresser, waiting to be found, waiting to change a life, waiting to finally be recognized for the $182 million treasure that it truly is. The 2020 P quarter dollar, a coin born from the worst year most of us have ever known, and yet carrying within its tiny, imperfect, impossibly rare surface more value, more history, and more human story than almost any object on the face of this earth. And that is why we will never stop searching, never stop looking, and never stop believing that the next great discovery could be right there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone exactly like you.